Time now for Morning Rounds, our look at the medical news of the week. We begin with a study that looked at the safety of drugs and therapies that are classified as novel. These are drugs and products that are considered by the FDA to be innovative medications that either serve unmet medical needs or significantly help to advance patient care and health.
The study looked at approvals from 2001 to 2010, examining 222 drugs. 71 of these, about a third, ended up producing some sort of post-market safety incident. It took an average of around 4 years from the time of approval to the first incident being reported. CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. Jon LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Narula are here to talk to us about this. John, to start with, what type of actions were taken, and when were the safety concerns? What were the safety concerns with these drugs?
Well, first of all, Tara and I were both impressed at the beginning of this, just for perspective, beginning of the article, they said that most pivotal trials that form the basis for these approvals involved fewer than 1,000 people for 6 months or less.
Which is
it's not very much, not very long.
Right.
So you can see why it's so important to have the post-marketing surveillance.
Right.
To keep looking at it after it gets approved. Of the problems that they had, there were 3 that were actually withdrawn from the market. 2 were for cardiovascular problems. 1 was for a neurological problem. There was 61 black boxes. You know what that is, where they put the black box warning. It says, you know, there's really a problem. And then there were 59 safety communications.
And Tara, with the drugs that they looked at, were there any trends when it came to safety?
There were a few trends. They found that biologic drugs, so those that are made from living cells as opposed to chemicals, seem to have more of these incidents. In addition, drugs that were designed for psychiatric diseases or disorders. And then in terms of approval and how they were approved, those drugs that were nearing the end of meeting their deadline for approval tended to have more incidents, as well as drugs that were under the accelerated approval track. And when we talk about that, we're saying, for example, when you're looking at trials or research and you're typically approving a drug, you might look for, did it improve survival? When it's in the accelerated track, you're looking at what we call surrogate endpoints, meaning did it shrink a tumor size as opposed to did it improve survival? So in all of these 4 areas, that's where we saw more of the incidents.
John, I mean, there's this ongoing debate, John, about how do you balance the whole idea of getting these drugs in the hands of people quickly versus, you know, ensuring safety standards. So where does the medical community come down on this?
It is really tough, right? On the one hand, you want to get that drug soon, especially if you have a problem that it could treat. On the other hand, you want to be safe. And this has been a real yin-yang and a lot of friction in the medical community about this. The U.S. Government Accountability Office had a report about 18 months ago, and it's about, I spoke to them just recently. They feel the same way, that they think that if you have a process where something's being accelerated in terms of how quickly there's a flame lit under it, it's getting approved a little more quickly than normal, they think that then post-market, after it's approved, you should be looking at it more closely and just to see you know, anything going on. The FDA says, look, we look at everything closely. And so we're not looking at that particularly more closely than anything else. So it's really, really tough. I mean, I think that Dr. Scott Gottlieb, the new head of the FDA, is going to have, you know, a lot of issues on his hand trying to figure out, do you accelerate this? And if you do, how do you do it in the safest way possible?
The sweet spot.
Yeah, it's easier said than done type of thing. Our next topic is going to deal with something that many people may be guilty of using, me this morning, cotton swabs to clean the inside of our ears. It can be hazardous for us and our children. A recently published study in the Journal of Pediatrics examined hospital data for children 18 and younger over a 20-year period. It found that an estimated 263,000 children were treated for ear injuries related to using cotton tip applicators. That equates to about 34 kids a day. 73% of the injuries occurred due to ear cleaning. Before you scold me, let's talk about the kids here. There are a lot of kids in the study. What are some of the trends that we saw there?
Yes, it's tempting to want to go in there when you see it in your child. But
don't do it.
Don't do it. 2 out of 3 of these injuries were in kids who were under the age of 8.
Wow.
And in fact, the number and rate seemed to peak in terms of injury around the age of 2 and then decline through the rest of adolescence. And when they looked at who was holding the cotton tip applicator, and 77% of the time it was the child themselves. But 16% of the time it was actually the parent apparent.
Yeah.
So in terms of the diagnoses that people were getting when they got to the ER, some of it was foreign body sensation, some of it was bleeding or actual rupture to the tympanic membrane in the ear or soft tissue injury. So while they say that 99% of these can be treated easily and discharged from the ER, there can be long-term ramifications. If you actually damage the inner ear, you can cause your child in the future to end up having problems with dizziness, balance, or even hearing loss.
Well, and obviously adults use these things too.
Yeah.
I mean, so what is the proper way to use them?
Well, firstly, you should just realize that maybe you don't have to do anything because the ear is a self-cleaning oven, right? And the wax is actually serving a purpose. It's lubricating. It actually has some antibacterial properties, and generally it goes out on its own. If you do need to put something in there, you can have a cloth on the outside. There are some drops you can put in or some irrigation solutions. But you definitely don't want to take a solid object and ram it in your ear. Think of like, a musket.
I don't do it like that, I promise you.
You can go to your doctor. I've had this happen when I had some earwax that was really embedded in there. And there's a little device that they put in, it goes, and it sucks it out. It's the greatest feeling in the world when that comes out. But don't do it on your own.
And some of it is teaching kids not to play with it, because some of these injuries were actually playing with the Q-tips, running with them, tripping and falling. So keep them away from...
Kids put things up their nose and their ear. Raisins.
You're supposed to do when you're a kid.
Pen caps, name it.
All right. Finally, technology that could relieve some patients of the burden of taking daily medications. Research published in the journal Nature Biomedical Engineering looks at a system developed by a team at Stanford that can monitor and maintain levels of drugs in the bloodstream. The personalized drug delivery tool includes the use of a biosensor that can track drug levels in real time, a control system that figures out the dosing, and a pump that delivers the medicine in the proper levels. The developers hope to make the system smaller so it can be implanted or worn by a patient. It's only been tested in animals at this point, and many years of testing are probably still ahead to make sure it's safe for people. But it sounds really interesting.
It makes perfect sense, right? When somebody needs antibiotics, we say 500 milligrams 4 times a day. Doesn't mean if you're big, small, large, doesn't matter. And with cardiac drugs.
So important to get the dose right, because when you're off, under or over, it makes a big difference. So yes, I think this push towards tailored, personalized medicine would be wonderful.
Way to go.
All right. Doctors Jon LaPook, Dr. Narula, thank you very much.